recording button. We're going to try recording for the first time today so that we can make these available to people who weren't able to attend. And if that works out, I'll start recording here on out, and we'll have a good resource for all these mini trainings. So that's where we're going to go from there. So first thing I'd like to just show you on the main screen that you normally arrive at for Crash Magic should be this screen, unless you have a shortcut right into your login screen. But this is still a good screen to know about, among other things. And I won't click into each of these because looking at everybody who's here, most of you have already seen this. We do have our forums, which I encourage everybody to sign into. They're a really great resource. And it's where most of the announcements for these mini trainings are going to go. Eventually, hopefully, I'll be able to stop emailing about them. We'll just have them up there in the forums. What happens when you click on this is you end up in here. And one of the things you can do when you go into the forums is you can, for any given forum, you can click on it and you can subscribe to it. If you click down here and you have a subscribe button, you can subscribe to that forum. And that means anything that changes in that forum, you will receive a notification by email. And that's a handy way if you want to pick, for example, the Crash Magic trainings list, subscribe to that, you'll get a notification every time that's updated. Okay, other things on this screen are our uptime monitor. You can see we went down on the 26th. I believe I did an installation without flagging it as maintenance time, but for the most part, you can see that we're up most of the time. This is also a good resource to see if we know that we're down. So if you come in and you can't get to the system, come to this page and you'll see that, that we're doing some maintenance. This section down here describes the updates that we've done, what changes have been made to the program. And you'll see that this one actually, we had a recent one that was really mostly a bug fix update. You'll notice every one of these is titled with a date and the version range that it covered, and therefore we're currently running at 3.9.57. The primary reason for this update, which otherwise would not have been released, is that we had a bug in the importer and it was causing a crash when you went to look at the import screen, and so people were not able to import. So that's taken care of now, and so we released that update to solve that bug. Generally, the updates, however, will have some new features, some reports maybe that are being created or other features in the program. Enhancements to existing features are common, and then there'll always be some bug fixes because we're always finding little stuff. This goes back in time for a little more than a year, I think, back to actually 2013, and that'll just continue moving forward. All right, so I'm going to drop out of there and out of there, and I'll save this on my other screen. Any questions before we get rolling or any comments? Okie doke. Looks like Tanya just reminded me to record. Thank you. Very good. So we're going to use Denver's configuration today. I was actually going to once again use Farmington as we did last week because they're a new database. I wanted to see how it was working. They don't have sufficient data for category lists. There's just simply not a lot of quantity of data, so it didn't look as interesting. And so I tried to grab a database with a bit more data. We're going to start with Denver. We'll also probably jump into one of the Arizona cities before we're done because there's a special type of category list that was created for the Arizona cities that others would probably like to see. So I'm going to log into Denver first. Okay. Wow, we're getting a good number of people out there. That's fantastic. It looks like when I send out the reminders, it actually does help. And when I don't skip a meeting, that helps as well. So that's great. It's good to see everybody out there. All right, so I'm going to start, just jump straight in to an existing study and start putting some charts in it because those are the most common use of category lists, which is what we're going to be discussing today, is category lists, which they're used for both charts, they're used for crosstabs, and there's also a feature not a lot of people know about, which is a highlighting feature, and they're used at the study highlight level. So I'll be using for all those purposes. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab an existing study that has some data in it. And so I'll grab this 17th Avenue and Colorado Boulevard. And I'm going to choose a chart. I've started, at least for the purpose of these mini trainings, naming the items that we use very carefully. I kind of used to use Pete's favorite and stuff like that. What I'm doing right now is I'm going to name them based on what they actually are in the system to see if I can make it a little more clear the difference between templates and reports and category lists and stuff like that. So as we go through, you'll see that they're a bit more consistent, and hopefully it'll help you better understand what the different components of the program are. So the first thing I'm going to do is choose the weather chart report templates. This is a report template that I've already created, and it is simply weather. And the reason I chose it is because it has few values, there's no fancy calculations, and I just want to show what a chart looks like internally when you're running it on the screen. So I'm going to select that. Okay, so there are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 categories plus an other or null category. There will always be an other or null in any of your charts because we want to avoid missing data. However, should you ever create a chart that doesn't have an other or null, it automatically is put in when we build them, but if you built one yourself, you wouldn't necessarily think to do that. There will become a red bar as the last bar if there is any data that was missed by the chart. So you'll never see a chart that is missing data for real. What will happen is you'll see a red bar appear over here that is called missing data, and it will grow if there are any crashes that were not handled by any of the chart bins, any of these conditions for these bins. So let's take a look at what I mean by that, the conditions for the bins. This chart is comprised of two things. The first thing it's comprised of is these settings. So it contains settings for how to lay it out, the title, the legend, the marks around the chart. If you have a bar chart, what the left axis or the bottom axis look like, what's in the footer, all the colors that are involved there, whether or not to show empty bins, which we'll see in a little bit, the type of chart, is it a bar chart, a pie chart, line graph, etc. All of those, and the sort order of how the bins should be placed, all of those things are part of the chart template. They're not really part of the category list. The category list just defines what goes in each of the bars, each of the bins. So this is part one of what's in the chart. Part two of what's in the chart, I'm going to click down here to select the category list. So here are all the available category lists, and we're currently using a category list called Adverse Weather Category List. So the category list becomes part of the chart. It's specified by the chart. These are the categories, sort of summarized here. I'm going to click on Edit the Category List. And this is what really generates the chart. This is what determines what data you will see where and how much data will appear in each bin or each bar. When I say bin, I'm referring to either a pie slice or the bar in a bar graph, something like that. That's the bin. And the reason I call it a bin is, in this case, let's say we've got 1, 2, I guess we still have 7 bins here. The first bin will contain all the crashes where adverse weather equals none. That's a value in the database, is the word none if the officer checked no adverse weather. Another possible value is rain. So if adverse weather in the database has rain as its value, that crash will be placed into the rain bin. And so there's a bin for every one of the fields. This is a single field in the database called snow, sleet, hail. And you'll see that now adverse weather would have to equal snow, sleet, hail. Anytime you see these little tildes, these are invalid characters. These are characters that can't be used in the syntax of these expressions. These expressions should be a bit familiar to you because they should look a lot like filter expressions. And that's exactly what they are, is they're filter expressions. This is a filter for the bin. So anytime we have a character, which you want to be able to see, you'd like it in the reports and you'd like to be able to use it throughout the program, which you can. But if you ever try to use it in a filter, you have to replace any of those special characters with those tildes. And the program does that for you. Anytime you select a value that has those in it, it'll put in tildes in its place. And so here's the remaining ones, and we'll go down to the last one, and this one's automatically generated. And what it did was, it said, if any of the values did not match, none, rain, snow, sleet, hail, fog, dust, wind, if it didn't match any of those, if that's false, then put it in this bin. And that really should prevent any data from appearing in what I described as the missing data bin, the red bin that would appear in every chart if there were any missing data. In this case, the only data that would appear in the missing data bin is if you had a null value, if there literally was no value in the field at all. Because as you can see, this is actually looking for some value. So if no values in the field, it would go into the null data bin. Okay. Any questions at this point about how those categories work? Because that's what we're going to build on today. Okay, one person has to say, nope, no questions. Just so I can hear if someone's out there.
No question.
Yay, thank you.
I'm here.
Excellent.
Manar was actually wondering how you got that chart listed to begin with.
Great, and I will most certainly get to that. It's because I created a chart template, and I will show you how to create a chart template as we move forward. So for right now, we're looking at an existing chart. We're talking about how the data gets into it, and then the next step will be creating a chart. And once we've created a chart, we'll talk about how you make that chart reusable, something you can use every time. So we'll get right to that, Manar. Okay. So I'm going to go back out of this chart. We'll take a look at what the results of this chart were. So again, we had all these different charts. This is called a category list, and I'm differentiating that between that and a report template. Okay, and a report.
Can you please maximize your window? We're having trouble reading it.
That help? That's as big as I get.
Thank you. Better.
You bet. Thanks for pointing that out. Okay, so So I've got these different options, and again, I wanted to distinguish between category list and report template. Category list is the bins. That's all it is. It's got color, it's got a condition, and it's got a name, and that's all that's in the category list. The chart template, in addition to specifying a category list, also contains the settings to build a chart, to make the chart the way you want it to look. Okay, so that was a weather chart. There are some other complicated ones, and there are functions you need to use to create some of the more complicated charts. The most complicated to build have to do with date and time. And the reason for that is because we use a date time field, and you have to pull pieces out of it if you want the hour or you want the day of the week or something like that. As a result, the program ships with a number of day of week, a number of time-based and day-based charts and category lists. So I'm going to use one of those and show you what those look like. So I'm going to grab probably our prettiest chart is the time of day chart. So the time of day chart, by default, the one that you get is dark as it gets to the middle of the night. It gets lighter and lighter to the middle of the day, and then it goes darker again. Let's take a look at the bins that were used to generate that. So as you can see, we have all these different bins specified, the description of what the bins are, and their colors. You'll notice that I cannot edit this. I've made myself not, I'm sorry, this is a built-in chart, and as a built-in chart, you can't change that. It's part of the system. What I'm going to do so I can show it to you, and this is a handy thing for you to be able to do if you ever want to change an existing chart, is I'm going to duplicate it. So I'm going to have time of day copy. Once I've done that, you'll notice that it comes down to my personal location, and that makes it not a shared category list. It's my personal category list, and now I can edit it. That's no longer grayed out. So I'm going to click on Edit, and this is a list of all of the bins for this category list. So each of the bins, you'll notice now, goes and it grabs, in this case, the time field, and everybody has their own version of a time field, and we also have our own what we call normalized version of a time field, this underscore time. You'll always have an underscore date and an underscore time in addition to whatever time field you may have in your database. We'll, of course, use the built-in one that we've got, the underscore date or time. You're welcome to use either one. They will always match, by the way. We just need to know that we have a date and a time field available to us. So all we're doing here, and I'm not going to go into the grand syntax without questions of what we're actually doing here, but basically we're taking the date, we're formatting it to hour, minute, minute. We're turning that into a number, so it becomes military time, and then we're using a function in our program called inRange to see if this value that is a military time is between 100 and 159. and every one of the bins does roughly the same thing. It's checking the range of what happens when you've turned this text, hour, minute, into a number, and then you check to see whether it's in a particular range, and that puts it in any one of the bins. Because a value needs to be in a time field, you're not going to find no data. You're not going to find other or null or something in here. So we didn't create an other or null value for this. You could have no data in the field at all, in which case you'd get that red bar. Very unlikely you'd find that with a date or a time field. Okay, let's look at another one like that. So let's take a look at, for example, day of week. The day of week is going to come back Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I'm going to once again duplicate this so that I can edit it. And I'll go in and edit it. And you'll see Monday through Sunday. And so Monday, this uses a function of ours called day of week string. And it looks at our date field that I told you we have a date and a time that are built in. And it looks at that and it checks to see if the day of week string is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so forth. Internally, we have the ability to do this as a number. We could be doing day of week number and doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those are a little bit ambiguous since you'd have to decide which was the first day of the week. So we simply use the text, and that makes that a little bit easier to both read and to manipulate if you want to change it. So the result of this would be the day of week chart. So when you first start using the system, you haven't created any charts at all, what you will always have available to you is collisions by year, day of month, day of week, month of year. You'll have one called severity. I'll talk about that in a minute. And you'll have time of day. If in your system, there have been other ones created that are shared to your user group, or for example, if you're in Arizona or California where we're starting to share, and Oregon where we're starting to share configuration components, you may have stuff that's shared across the state or just in your agency. Those will all appear in the shared section. Then you'll have your own personal ones, and these are ones that nobody else can see unless they get, as I've described, promoted to become a shared resource. That's an administration function that an administrator can move those things from a personal account to the shared account. Okay, so you'll have all of those. Let's take a look at what happens when you want to manipulate one of these. So in what you saw me do before was I went and I took let's go back out to one of these. Let's look at one of the ones we already had open here. I'm going to change one of these to use a different category list. So I got the day of week, that was a copy, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to change the category list to time of day. And you recall we had time of day had all of these different values every hour. For exactly an hour. Perhaps what you're really looking for, though, is rush hour time of day. You want to find out how many crashes happen in the morning or in the afternoon rush or not during rush hour, something like that. What you can do is you can go into the category list and you can start removing some of these. So if I removed 2 a.m. and I deleted that, and I removed 3 a.m. and I removed 4 a.m., what would happen right now if I ran this chart is any of those crashes would appear in that red bin at the end, which is the missing data, because we've made a mistake. We haven't included all the possible values anymore. Now we've removed some of them. But on the other hand, if I said that this 1 a.m. was actually 1 a.m. through 5 a.m., and I said this is going to run 1 until 4:59, now the chart is perfectly fine. Now what you're going to have is a chart that's going to show all the crashes that happened from 1 to 5 in a single bin. So I'm going to take this to its extreme. I'm not going to show you this one, but I did create one called rush hours that only has 4 bins. And what rush hour looks like is I said, let's take a night, right? So I went to the very first one, the midnight. And this is a little bit tricky because if you think about military time, somehow it has to roll over at midnight. So while all the other bins are a simple range, right, is in range 600 to 859. There's your morning rush. Evening rush is 1630 to 1800, and day is very straightforward with 900 to 1630. That all works just fine. Nighttime needs two conditions. It has to either be in the range of 6 p.m. to midnight, or it has to be in the range of midnight to 6 a.m. So the nighttime one has to sort of wrap around the back of the clock at midnight. So created each of these. I created a nighttime one, and all I did was rename it and give it a different range. Then I went to the morning rush hour, and I renamed it, told it morning rush, and I gave it a different time range than it used to have. Daytime, picked that. Evening, picked that. And you'll notice I changed the colors for those as well. So the nighttime was a darker color, morning rush hour, day, yellow, and then a darker for evening rush hour. So if I run that one, same concept as the pie chart, but now we just get 4 bins. Okay, so now I have my night, my morning rush, my daytime, and my evening rush. Okay. So let's see where else we can use. Actually, this would probably be a great time to do templates. So why don't we do that? So let's say that I've come in here and I'm going to go in and create a new type of chart. And we already started doing that. So I'll go grab one of these. So let's take our time of day copy. And I'm going to edit this so that it's a little bit different. It's something that I want, but it's going to be a little bit different than what was already there. So what I want to do is I would like to show all of my rush hour. We'll use this a little bit differently. We'll show all my rush hour as orchid or blue violet, anything in that range. Purple. And I'm going to show my evening rush the same way. Okay, so I've just changed the colors for these bins. And I'm going to return back. And now you can see that they're shown here in a different color than the blues. We've now got these purples and fuchsias and so forth. And I've got a category list that's now called time of day copy. I'd like to give it a better name so that it's more clear to me later when I look at it. It is going to be called time of day. Ooh, I think I even spelled fuchsia right. There's time of day fuchsia. And I'm going to give this the name category list so that we remember that this is a category list, not a report and not a report template. This is a time of day fuchsia category list. So we'll run that first. You always want to check these before you save them. And you can see that that's exactly what's happening is what I'd intended with my slightly early rush hour and my evening rush hour. And now what I want to do is give it a name. So it automatically named it to the same name as my category list, right? That's the best guess it can make. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call this a time of day fuchsia report template. I'm going to click in the tree so it has an opportunity to update that. Now the tree is correct, this name is right. And so now I have a time of day fuchsia report template. These buttons down here are the answer to what Minar's question was, which is how can I make this available in the future without having to create it every time? So once I've created a report, and this is now a report because it's able to, I'm actually here, I'll come back over here and show you what the report looks like. I'm looking at a report here. I'm going to now choose to push this back as a template. So save a copy of this chart as a template. And I'm going to call this template time of day fuchsia report template. Now I assure you, you don't want to start naming all your things templates and category lists and so forth because they already know where they're going to appear in the program. You'll never see a list that says to you, do you want the report template or do you want the category list or do you want the report? It knows what you're needing to select at that point. So you really just need to name these time of day fuchsia or for any of those. I'm naming them this way so you can see where they sort of appear, where they're being used and how they're being connected. So I'm calling this a time of day fuchsia report template, and I'll create a new template. Okay, the direct result of having done that is now when I go to my charts, included with all of my options, I have a time of day fuchsia report template. And if I choose that template, I get that chart that I have just built in a chart on the screen. And that's now a report. And all I had changed here, if you recall, was the category list. I'm going to take this a little step further. I'm going to change this, first of all, from a bar chart to a pie chart. And I'm going to turn on a legend on the side over here. And I'm going to make sure we don't have marks around all the items there. I'm also going to make the title very large. I'm going to make the footer a bit larger. And we'll make the chart title have a color. Okay. So now I've got a very different type of report. It's got the same data in it, but now we're using a legend and a pie chart to show the values that are in it. And I have a couple of options if I want to see this again. I'm going to go choose, again, to save this because I'd like to have access to it. And you can see that we have our time of day fuchsia report here, and we could decide to replace that one. And from then on, that's what our time of day fuchsia report template would look like, is it would be a pie chart instead of a bar chart with all of the changes that I made to it. But I could also say time of day pie template, and I'll create that. Now I have two of them. And now when I'm looking at any data, I can opt to do a chart, and now I have both options. Time of day pie report, time of day pie template, or I can do time of day fuchsia report template, which is the one with the bars. Okay, those are now all saved and they're available to me anytime. I log out, I come back in, those have all been saved back because right here is where I'm putting them back as a report template. This should not be confused with what you get when you just run the program. Just in the course of running the program without any explicit saving, I was creating all these category lists. So it's not like you have to remember to save every time. Everything you do is saved as you work. What you're gaining by making a report template out of it is the ability to select it as a new report up top. That's the key piece. That's what these buttons are for, is to make templates to allow these to appear in your button selections up top. Any questions at this point?
No.
Okie doke. All right, another use.
Menard does have a couple if you want to look at the chat. He wants to.
If you add a category list after deleting, will the tables on the right get populated automatically? If you add a category list after deleting, will the tables on the right get populated automatically? Do you have a better understanding of that question than I do? I'm assuming we're talking about this. If I add a category, no, add a category list after deleting. Sorry, I don't understand that question. Can you clarify that, Minar? And I'll move on to the next one, and then I'll come back to see what your clarification is. So if you delete 4 a.m., can I add 4 a.m. at the same place? That's a good question. Not trivial, only because you have to push up a whole bunch of times. But if I took 4 a.m., I'm going to copy that because I'm going to cheat. If I delete 4 a.m. out of the list, it's now gone. I can still add a new bin. I don't believe it'll drop in at exactly the right spot. That would be nice. Now 4 a.m. lands at the bottom. So you have to put in the condition for your 4 a.m., put in 4 a.m., and then I can move this up the list, up into its slot.
And then he also asked what the fill category list button was.
Oh, that's a great question. Manar, you're getting the good ones today. Thank you. And so that's what it would look like if you deleted and you added another one. That's not appearing where I expected it to, and I apologize. I'm going to take a look and see whether I selected the wrong one when I stuck it in. But the basic answer is you can delete, and you can certainly stick a new one in. You can add several new ones in, and then you have to move them up the list once they've been added. What is the fill category list for? Great question, because what you'd like to be able to do is create your own charts, category lists, without having them already exist or without having to type in all of that syntax for every one of them. So an option here is to say make a new one. So it creates a new one called untitled, and now have a new category list that is empty. And option one is click on add a whole bunch of times and fill in all the values for whatever you'd like. Fill category list lets me pick a field in my database. So for example, I could choose lighting condition. Actually, I'm going to choose most harmful. That has some other purposes to it. So we're going to choose most harmful here. Okay, and what it did was it took every field in the most harmful, every value in the most harmful field, and it created an expression for that value. It put in the name of the lookup, and then it put in the expression that matches that lookup for every one of these values. And then it also added that last one I was telling you about where it says it's not any of those individual values. And so now I have a most harmful chart that I can display. It also populated it with random colors throughout. And this was already a pie chart when we were looking at it before, so it left it as a pie chart. You could also look at this as a bar graph. Now you'll notice, however, that there's lots of zeros in here. And the zeros both clutter the chart and really don't give you a whole lot of information. On a time of day chart, zeros are useful. You get the perspective of the day when you're looking at all of the hours of the day. But for something like most harmful, you don't necessarily need all those different values. So one of the options in the chart is to not show empty bins. Right now, by default, you will always be showing empty bins. I just changed that so that we don't show empty bins. And now you only see the values that are actually populated. There are no more zeros in that chart. So the purpose of, I'm going to click on new again. The purpose of that button down here to fill category list is to pick from any of the categorical fields in your database. So here's another simple one, daylight, dawn, or dusk, so forth. All right. And because in this particular case, we always try to name things as automatically as we can. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Sometimes there isn't that information available to the program. In this case, we picked a particular field that was called lighting condition, and we populated it with all the values from lighting condition. We were able to name the category list based on that field name, lighting condition, and we can therefore name the report lighting condition. Now, I didn't change that, put spaces in it or capitalize or anything, but all of that is able to be figured out automatically, and then you can go back and change that if you don't like how it was created. We need to remember the syntax. So syntax, this is a comment from Minar as well, is the syntax in each of those bins. That is the filter syntax in the program. Anytime you see any syntax in our program, anytime you're looking at stuff you type in as an expression, it is always the exact same syntax, and it is our filter syntax. There's a pretty decent amount of help online, but most of the time the program will build it for you. I'm going to deviate a little bit from category lists and jump in and just show you what a filter looks like and how a filter also helps you with that same syntax. In fact, I think we can do this. Excuse me, I'm going to jump into exactly where we were because I believe there's an editor in here. Yes, so when you're looking at any of these bins and you want to work on them, you can use the syntax. You can also instead use the editor. And the editor will let you pick from fields down here. So I can go back to lighting condition, and I can say lighting condition equals dark unlighted, add that expression. It's built the syntax for you. So you generally should not have to know the syntax unless you're getting into a bit more complicated expressions that are in the system. But this is the exact same syntax, so I save this, bring it back, and that's now the expression. You'll notice it's a little different than the way we built it. We built it using a function called AnyMatch. Same logic, it just means this equals this, but it allows us to add more values if we want. So it's a handy function to use, but it has the same meaning as lighting condition equals lighting condition unlighted. Questions on that? All right, fantastic. So where else can we use these? Let's get out of here. And all right. So another place that these category lists are handy, now stop thinking about charts because now we're just talking about the bins that we created, is the crosstab report. So the crosstab report, you have to start with some report. I'm going to just choose a time of day versus day of week. These are your report templates. Once you have a report template that's perhaps closest to what you're looking for, you can then manipulate that the same way we did the charts. You start with some chart and then you move forward and customize it or make changes to it for what you want. This one was the time of day versus day of week crosstab, and it's breaking down across the top by day of week and down here on the left side by time of day. Well, let's say you wanted to look at the rush hour version of this. You're not so interested in the exact time of day these occurred. You want to know how many happened at rush hour versus not. So as is usual, down at the bottom of this bar, the rightmost buttons on the bar are generally the most specific for manipulating the report. On the very left, you have stuff that manipulates the study. Then you have always printing and copy and paste, creating templates. Everything after that is usually related directly to the report. So I'm going to click on this, and this is going to allow me to change my category set. So how does a category set relate to a category list? A category set is two category lists. So a category set in this case is the time of day category list and the day of week category list. Okay. Once again, I'm not going to be able to edit this. I can't click on edit category set because this is a built-in category set. So I'm going to duplicate it. I now have my own copy. So it has day of week still and time of day in it. And I'm going to click on edit category set. Edit category set is as simple as choosing the two category sets that you've built in the system that you want to build a crosstab for. So I'm going to change from time of day, and I'm going to go find the one that I did rush hours. There's my rush hours instead of time of day. Now I have my rush hours category list selected against against day of week. Save that, and now you'll see I have rush hours. And this one also is able to rename it for me because it saw the category list names that I chose. So as soon as it saw me change it, it went and it changed the name for me. So I don't have a name here that says time of day versus day of week. And I'll choose OK. And so those are our rush hour versus non-rush hour times for each day of the week. So you can go about changing the category list very easily through here, any of the ones we've worked with. So instead of looking at day of week, we'll take our rush hours and see what types of collisions are happening. So let's grab, most harmful. That's a pretty messy one. Lots of possible values in here, right? And we'll save and exit that. So a new, oops, I believe it's in here. Let's take a look. I was going to say that a new feature of the program allowed you to not show empty. There we go. You can also choose, and this is relatively new for this summer, is you can choose to eliminate empty rows and or empty columns from the crosstab report. So now we should be able to have a much cleaner, more readable category list in our crosstab. Now I look at this and I'm thinking, these worked well down this side when the top only had 2 or 3 values in it, or it was pretty narrow. At this point, I'd kind of rather see these long words appearing down the side and these appearing across the top. So I just want to change the axes of this. So I'm going to do the same editing I've been doing. And I could just click here, find most harmful, click here, try and find rush hours, but it's a common thing to mix up the row and the column. So you can just click this button and it switches them back to the other way. And it just reverses them. And so now you have a bit of a cleaner category list. Okay, so category lists can take any two category sets, category sets crosstabs can take any two category lists, calls them a category set, and puts them in there and gives you this crosstab table. All right, questions on crosstabs? Okay, gonna move on from crosstabs. So to show this next use of category lists, I'm going to use a collision diagram and a listing report. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a listing. And let's actually create, let's take the default one here. I don't know what listing is. Let's see what listing is. Nothing in there. Grab this. And we're going to edit this list. I want to put a few fields in it. And this is a topic for another time, is how you do all of these. But I'm going to create a new list. And I'm just going to pick some fields out of it. But the fields that I want that are important to me right now are going to include some of the fields we used in the category lists. So I'm going to want first harmful. I'm going to want lighting condition. I don't know if we had most harmful or first harmful. I think we had weather. And we'll also want, we've got time of day already, and we've got day of week. I'm sorry, we've got date, which will get us day of week. Okay. So I'm going to insert all of these as columns into my report. And so this is just a basic listing, just has a few fields in it. We're not doing any special selection or formatting. I didn't even reorder them. Good, we do have some different types of weather in here. Well, that's the one we'll probably use first. Okay. So I now have this case ID list that is for a particular location. What you'll notice about the location, the study up here, is you got a name, and it also says the date, and it says the filter. We actually need to add this to it. When you look at the top of the screen, you'll see the same information, but we've also got a slash and the name of your category list. So every study has a filter and has a category list, as well as the parameters that created it. So I'm going to jump in and just take a direct look at the study, and you'll see all of those values in the settings. So in this study, I have a type for my study. I've got a filter, which right now is clear. I've got categories, which is currently selected to none. And I've got the parameters for that particular study. But you notice my categories, there are quite a number of options in there. So if I change the categories for this study, it will impact many of the reports. It'll impact any report that respects categories in it. Charts already have their own categories, and crosstabs already have their own categories, so you don't want to override those. But listings and diagrams can respect the categories list. So here's a collision diagram. Again, no filter and no category list. Well, let's change the category list. I could go back up to the study, pick the settings, and choose it there. I can also choose it right here. This is change the study category list. So I'm going to change this to lighting condition. And select OK. So now the crashes are highlighted by the same values as that chart for lighting condition was highlighted. The category list for defining lighting condition is now being applied to the chart with all of those colors. The same thing happened to the listing. So in this listing, your dark lighteds are showing up as a reddish, your daylights are showing up whitish pink, and that looks like that's most of what we've got in there. Okay, I'm going to do another thing here. I'm going to change this, so I'm going to sort on the accident time. I think we can sort by time of day in here. Oh, and for those of you who were here last week or the week before when we were doing the sort and the second and third sort were not sticking, I was able to change them and they displayed, but then they wouldn't come back. That's been resolved. That's fixed in this version, and so you can now choose multiple sort levels. So I'm going to choose time. I think that says a date. Let's see what we get out of that. We might have to have a single time field for that. 11:21. This is actually using this particular time field contains a date in it. This will actually look interesting. I'm going to change the category list now to time of day. And so that will be reflected in this listing. And you'll see what it's doing is it's going from, as the days and the times get greater, it's highlighting based on the time of day. So all of your nighttime ones are showing up very dark. All of your daytime ones are showing up light. Okay, so that's your time of day, just like the time of day chart. And the collision diagram did exactly the same thing, because again, this is applied to the study. So now these are all based on time of day. They're darker if it happened in the night, and they're lighter if it happened during the day. And so you can apply that for any of these category lists that you've created. You click in here and your options include everything that we've worked on for any of the category lists. So I can choose harmful. And these colors all indicate the same values as the chart would if you display the chart. So these are your front to sides are showing up in green, side to side are showing up in orange, front to rear showing up in gray, and so forth. So that's what this category list is for. Changing that back to none means there are no categories, and so everything shows up plain. Questions about using the category list for the study, for highlighting? Okay. I have worked with some of you to create high crash location lists. And in the high crash location list, I've been able to show you, and I've generally done the building of these, more columns. So we've been able to show by year, or show by severity, or by anything, by lighting, whatever you wanted out here. And those all had to be built manually. There's an editor for that, and you build those manually. Something I'm working on right at this moment is the ability to select a category list, and that category list will be used to break out all the different types that you want. And that way, if you've already got a category list by year or a category list by severity, you just select that. That's what appears here. You don't have to worry about editing all that syntax. So I expect we'll have that in the coming weeks. Okay, the last type of category list, I'll stop there for a second because we're going to jump over here and take a look at a configuration in the Phoenix area and look at one slight different use of category lists. But first, let me take any questions that we may have right here. See, if I all had you in the room, I could look you in the eye and I could say, I know you've got a question. No. All right. So I'm going to log out of there. I've been in the demo configuration. I don't know if I have a demo in Arizona. Oh, I may still. Let's see if that's running. I was hoping to use Phoenix on this one, or Peoria. Tell you what, we're going to go use Peoria. I'm going to log into the real system here. So I'm going to jump straight into the hosted. Since Manar is out there watching, we'll hit Peoria. And let's take a look at a single location. Okay, that's a reasonable amount of data. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a crosstab, and let's see if we've got one of these. Severity type, type and severity. So this is a crosstab that was created specifically for the Arizona data, but it can certainly be created for other agencies' data structures as well and data formats as well. And you'll notice something a little bit different here about this category list. The category list that's selected here has in it angle, head-on, left turn, rear end, side swipe, and other, right? And those are all mutually exclusive values at the type of collision. But then it's also got property damage, fatality, and injury. These are not mutually exclusive to these, and therefore, if you normally put these in a category list, you would get an error. I'm going to actually go generate that error right now, I believe. Let's see if I can go edit that in a way to generate the error. Okay, it will be a little bit tricky for me to generate the error. I will show you what it would look like, but I don't want to mess up existing category set in here that they've already got. But what happens is these are mutually exclusive, and if you ever tried to drop data into one of these after you'd built it, you would get an error saying you can't put a crash in both angle and in fatality because it's not going to add up to 100, and we expect our category lists to add up to 100. Well, you'll notice that when I edit this category list, there's a checkbox up at the top of all the category lists that says allow crashes in multiple bins and it will not sum to 100. And by default, you wouldn't want that, but in this case, it gives you a nice new report. And it gives you a capability you normally wouldn't have. Which is to be able to show these not necessarily adding up to 100. Now we did, when we implemented this, we made sure that the total would still add up correctly. So when we're totaling, we're actually totaling the real values in both directions. So we're basically ignoring half of the values up there for the category list. But that's a new feature, and that's something additional that you can do with category lists, is make them not mutually exclusive. I think we may actually have, see if this is a layout that utilizes that in an interesting way. No, that's just a regular printout for that. Let's see if we've got one here. I'm looking now for layouts that utilize multiple reports. So this is a layout that has a top section and then it's got two other smaller reports at the bottom. And if you haven't seen layouts, what we're basically doing is taking several reports, putting them into a PDF and giving them a layout. So this particular layout shows you a listing, and then at the bottom of the listing, it jumps into this summary table, which is a similar type of summary as we just looked at, but it actually includes some violation categories. These looks like these are all violation categories here, and then types of collision over here, and then severity over here across years. And so all of that's now combined into one large report. But the main piece to think about there is that this category list is not mutually exclusive and will work to generate that type of a summary report. So where I wanted to, so I do want to show you what the error would look like so that you understand when you're getting it, why you're getting it. So let's go back into where we were in our Denver demo here. So just as an example, let's grab one of my existing, let's say, lighting condition charts. And I'm going to modify this slightly. So the example of this would be akin to saying, let's add a bin. And the bin that we're going to add here is going to check type of collision. So I'm going to look for some sort of type of collision in here. Let's use first harmful, I guess. I'm going to say first harmful equals front to rear. I was looking for rear end. That's not happening. Okay, so now I've got a filter that is looking for rear end collisions. Okay, so now that bin is going to populate for rear ends. Okay, we'll exit out of here and take a look at what our new chart looks like. Our chart should have lighting of daylight, dawn or dusk, dark or lighted, and then another bin for rear end collisions. That's a problem. This chart contains at least one record that was placed into more than two or more bins, and that's going to result in an incorrect chart definition. That's the result of an incorrect chart definition. So the solution to that is either to get rid of this other type of bin, or if it's really what you wanted, you have to flag that and say that you want to allow crashes to go into multiple bins, and that's the purpose of that checkbox. Generally not something you want to do by accident because these should be adding up, but you understand what that's for. So as not to confuse myself later. Okay, time for questions about category lists, charts, crosstabs, highlighting. What have you got? "13 of us out there."
So Manar was wondering why you didn't use the and or in the filter previously.
The word and or, is that what we're looking at? Typically if you're, yeah, well, this is a piece of that. That's a bit of a good question. When you have these category lists, as an example of, for example, let's say I wanted to group a few of these. This is kind of a common thing in Colorado's data. You'll notice this is kind of interesting. You got this type of collision going on at this part of the field, and then later on in the field, you've got a whole bunch of fixed objects. I think there's like 20 fixed objects in this list, and then type of collision. And a lot of times when you're doing analysis, you really don't need to know what type of fixed object it was if you're identifying the type of collision. You might want it if you're trying to identify what needs to be repaired on the road, who needs to be built back, stuff like that. But for type of collision, you usually might want to group those. So one way to do that, right, if I came in here, let's look for a traffic signal pole versus a sign. I could, if I had used, if I had used ors in here, I could just take most harmful, and I could say most harmful equals harmful event traffic signal pole, right? That would have been a legitimate way to create this. And then if I had wanted to add sign to that, I could have said or most harmful equals harmful event sign, right? And that would have worked. There's one catch with this that I'll show you in just a second. That would have worked, but it was a whole lot more typing, a little bit more complicated with the syntax. But here's the most important part. It's wrong. This word or here requires that you put parentheses around the logic pieces of this, because otherwise you're not necessarily asking for most harmful to be traffic signal pole or event sign. You might be asking for most harmful to be OR'd with this traffic signal pole. That's a little bit funny to think about, but when you make these complicated enough, anytime you have an or, you must put in parentheses. I can't think of a case where or does not require parentheses around the two parts of the expression. So as a result, rather than you seeing me type a lot of ors in here, and by the way, you'll also see or used this way. That symbol, the vertical bar, means or as well, in the same way that an equal sign also means equal. It's equivalent syntax in our code. So in the same way that you could do this for doing multiple values, and by the way, it grows, right? I have sign if I want to do guardrail, cable rail, and so forth. I'd have to keep on putting all these ors and making sure my parentheses were all correct. We have a function. It's called AnyMatch. And by using the function AnyMatch, I not only simplify my syntax, I get rid of all those ors and ands. So now my most harmful can be matching against signal pole, or, and I don't need my word or any of my parentheses anymore, first harmful event sign. And now if I want to add others, I can say harmful event dot guardrail, and so forth. Another way to use this that's also very handy is if you're building these and you go into the editor for this rather than typing it in yourself, I'm going to get rid of all these. I can go in here, make sure I have my any match up there first, and you'll notice over here, in addition to being able to choose what you may have chosen in the past, which are our query fields, I can instead look for my lookup constants. So this is all the values that you're putting on the right side of these expressions. It's all these values in here. Well, when you have a field, right? All these values, those are lookup constants. And so if I choose lookup constants in here, I get all of the ones that are in the entire system listed. And if I'm looking at most harmful, and I scroll up here to most harmful, I believe these will be under harmful event. You'll find that the lookups for most harmful are called harmful event. I can choose, let's actually go in here and grab delineator post and curb and embankment and fence and guardrail, light pole, mailbox, grab as many of these as I want, and I can click on insert. These are now all the values that are going into this expression. I don't have to put ands or ors. I do need to put commas on these. But I've put all of those values as part of the condition for that any match against most harmful. And so if I save that and come back, this is no longer just traffic signal pole. This is many fixed objects. And if I ran this just as is, what happens? I would probably get an error because I would find things landing in here for curb, even though I've already got curb in here. I would find things landing for delineator post, even though delineator post is in here. So this would be an appropriate time to come in and delete other values that we had captured with the many fixed objects. So fence, and so on. I'm not going to go through all of those. But the idea is that by not using ors and ands, I avoid a lot of syntax. I can just use functions that are built into the program. Functions are very easy for us to create. And we have created a lot of them. In fact, we may have, let's go in here and see if all of them are listed in here. Function list. More than you'll ever want to see, but there are a lot of functions in here. Some of the more common ones that you're going to use are these logic functions. So logic functions are like the all match that we're using. It returns true if all the values are the same. All true is if all the expressions are the same. Any match is if we get even one hit on any of them. Any true is if any of the values in there come up true. If you've done any programming, case is a very handy statement. Case lets you put in a value and say, if it's this value, do this. If it's this value, do this. If it's this value, do this. Instead of saying if, then, else, and having to use all the ands and ors in there. So we create functions whenever we can to make the use of the expression editor that much easier and less error prone as well. And Manar's question is, why is it there? Whoa, I think Tanya's answering that just fine. I don't think I'll go there. Was that a question I should address, Tanya? Tanya's gone.
Well, I was a little confused because I'm here. You were on the other screen to add a bin in the chart.
Mm-hmm.
So you could add a custom bin there, and then he was wondering about the and and or. But the and and or just has to do with helping you to build the expression, the filter expression in that box.
Right. And or are the most powerful pieces of the filter editor. If you're building filters and it starts getting complex, and or are your friend, you have to use them. But whenever it's a fairly common task, we will try to build functions that don't require and or so that it's a little bit easier to manage. So you can sort of take your pick. I can tell you right now, there are plenty of people that don't want to see the functions, the any match, all match, stuff like that. They're just fine using and or. Parentheses come naturally to them. That's fine. It's like any other programming language. But like any other programming language, by adding functions to it, you make things simpler to do, simpler to read, and therefore more maintainable. And I'm going to cancel because I know I did horrible things to that chart. Bin. All right. More questions. So far, still about category lists. We'll jump into other stuff as soon as we're done with those. Category lists, category sets, any of that stuff. Or if anybody can think of something I'm doing with category lists that I didn't mention. I will mention one thing for those of you that are administrators on your system. You've noticed that when during this presentation today, when I have a report template, I've described to you that the report template is referring to a category list. So the report template requires that category list to be available. So if you're an administrator, if you're not an administrator, just close your eyes for a couple minutes. If you're an administrator, when you go to the administrative side of the program and you go into Pete, and Pete says, I made this really cool report template. So I've got a chart report template that's for rush hour, and I'd really like everybody to have access to that. So you grab the rush hour chart template, you come down here as you've been instructed to do to share these, and you move it up to the shared portion of Denver. And you allow everybody in Denver to have a rush hour template. That template won't work by itself. That template relies on the rush hour category list. Without it, it will have no category list. So I need to move that up to shared as well so that anybody using it can access it. Otherwise, Pete would be the only one for whom that would work. So now our Denver shared has the report template for that type of chart, and it has the category list. I'm going to do one more thing. As long as I'm over here, this will help, again, administrators be able to share this. You may recall at the time, in fact, I'll go back and we'll show it to you twice. So I go back here, and now you'll notice if I choose a location, and I go to choose a chart, I now have a rush hour chart template available to me. Okay? Anybody does now who logs in to this configuration of Denver. You may have noticed that up at the top, we have these general report buttons, and we have something called custom reports. The only difference is that all of these present you with a pop-up box that says, which one would you like to run? Right? Select from available crosstabs, select from available charts, and so forth. Over here, no such thing. Each of these runs a report directly. So what if I wanted that rush hour chart to be over here? What would I do? I'd go over to my admin side, and inside of your shared configuration, which administrators have access to, you've got some sort of buttons in here, options, report buttons, and it may have a different name, but it'll be under your report buttons in shared. I can now choose rush hour chart template, add that template, and now I've got a rush hour chart template as part of those buttons. In order to see that, it requires logging out and logging back in again, so only people who are logging in would see that. But from now on, anytime I have access to reports, I now have a new one. I've now got my rush hour chart template that's a single click away. I no longer have to select it or find it or anything else. It's just there. And that does work, as an aside, that works for any of these report types. Any report type that you have as a template up here, you can move over and make a specific one of them into a custom report so that your users can access those easily. And you can put as many of those as you like. There's 3 in here, and that's a nice fit, but this will get as wide as it needs to get as you add to it. I think. See, I haven't gone past 3 except in our testing, so I think we should do it right now. So I'm going to go into my Denver buttons. Tanya, stop cringing. It'll be okay. And I could grab
Be fun to watch.
my default list. I can add that template. I can say I'd like to have my severity chart as a template. I'd like to have my time of day chart. I want that crosstab I have. So all of those are now available and should appear in that button list, and the button list should just grow larger to accommodate all those reports that I threw into it. And there you have them. So that button, that'll just get wider and wider as you add more reports to it. One other neat thing you can do when you've created all these templates as well, once you've created report templates like that, when you're looking at your high crash location list and you make some selections in it, and you may have already come down here and chose give me collision diagrams, but I can do that for any of my reports. So I can go to my rush hour chart template. I'm going to click this button to keep it a little cleaner, make a new project. Click on that plus after choosing the chart, and it'll tell me I created a new project that contains 7 new reports from the high crash location list. This chart contains at least one record that was placed. Oh, did I mess up my report bin, my rush hour chart template? There we go. So each one of those locations that I selected ran, yeah, we messed up our chart bins for the rush hour chart template. So some of these are coming up with these dupes. So anyhow, I've created all of these different reports directly from the high crash location list. And they don't need to, you don't need to create each of those individually, and they don't have to be collision diagrams. They can be any report template that can appear up here. So anything you can produce up here can show up down there. And for those of you that aren't familiar with projects, what happened here is it created a new project for us. I'm going to go back to the project that we were playing in before, which is this one. That was just a way of me making sure I didn't clutter up this project with a whole bunch of new studies. Okay, last chance for questions on category lists, and then you get to all bombard me with questions unrelated. Tanya, I'm going to have a cup of tea. You want to answer the questions from everybody and everything else? She's gone.
Sure.
All right, any other questions?
Sure.
No other questions. Well, excellent. Anybody want to give me some thoughts on this idea of going monthly? I've had a couple of you say that weekly was too much. Like to hear thoughts from as many people as I can on it. So if anybody wants to speak up on that issue, in addition to asking general questions, I'd be interested to hear that as well.
Yeah,
monthly works for Phoenix.
Monthly works for Phoenix. Great. Thanks, Rick.
Monthly works for Greeley.
Monthly works for Greeley. Excellent.
Monthly would be fine for Oregon as well.
You're just making my life a little easier, right? Though I do enjoy these, I must say, but they do take some time to prepare for.
Yeah, I have 2 more monthlies in the chat.
Okay, great. Okay, I think what's going to probably happen is we're going to do monthly, but I think I may drop in more frequently beginner level ones as we have new people joining the system all the time. And for that matter, new people at agencies where the agency's already been running it. I think it may be helpful to toss in, so keep the monthly specialized. So the monthly will always be a specific topic, and then they throw in every couple of weeks, throw in a beginner course that just says here's how you log in and create the basic stuff.
And I'd like to add to continue the reminders. Those are wonderful.
Okay. What I need to do in order to do that is I need to make an opt-out mechanism that's a little easier, because right now I'm sending out a couple of hundred of them each time, and I'm sure there are people that don't want to see them. It's just based on who's got to log into the system. So I will make sure that I set that up to work with our normal opt-in, opt-out system, and you'll have to choose that. But thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
That was Kim, right?
Yes.
Great.
Hi, Peter.
Hi. Anybody else? Comments, requests, questions?
Menard did just ask a question about GIS capability.
I think we should do that as our next monthly. Thumbs up for that one. We can certainly do GIS, especially Menard in Arizona. You've all got coordinates on all of your data. Anybody who's got coordinates on all of your data can show those crashes on a map. And anybody that is not a state agency, sorry, state agencies can do high crash location lists to a map. State agencies, we have to be a little more tricky. We have to zoom you into a city or a location first before we do high crash locations. But we can still, with state agencies, put all the crashes on a map. So yeah, tune in next month. Or call me if it's urgent. No need to wait. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you all for coming. If there's something you needed from us directly, be sure you contact us. Otherwise, I'll send out a reminder, hopefully a little sooner than the day of, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.